My name is Major General Rowan Creed, and for 6 years my parents pretended I didn't exist. Then one day a wedding invitation arrived. Heavy cardstock, gold embossed. No dear no with love. Just one line printed in exacting font, Major General Rowan Creed. No daughter, no sister, just the rank, just the title. Inside there was a handwritten note. Not a greeting, not a welcome. Just one word, behave. It sat in my hand like a dare. As if my presence could crack their polished veneer. As if I were a weapon, not a woman. 6 years. That's how long it had been since I'd last heard my mother's voice, in anything other than a clip someone forwarded by accident, or soundbite from a local gala, where she pretended she didn't have 2 daughters. No phone calls, no visits. Not even when I was medevaced out of Helmand, with a concussion and partial hearing loss. And now suddenly I was invited to witness the carefully choreographed union of my younger sister Sierra, the daughter they kept, and a man I'd never met. Or so I thought. The paper smelled like lavender and control. The envelope was sealed with a wax stamp bearing our family crest, as if legacy were enough to erase silence. I held it over the trash can for a long time, but I didn't drop it, because something in me, something I thought had long gone quiet, stirred. Not anger, not vengeance, something colder. A quiet, aching kind of disbelief. Did they still remember how to spell my name? I didn't go because I missed them. I didn't go because I needed closure. I went because after everything they'd done to erase me, they still had the audacity to send a card. And I wanted them to see that I hadn't disappeared, not by accident, but by choice. The envelope sat on my desk for 3 days before I even opened it again. It wasn't that I didn't know what to do. It was that I did. And the weight of that knowing settled in the pit of my chest like gravel. Outside the sky over Fort Aldrin turned to dull silver clouds dragging themselves across the morning like tired regrets. I stood by the window, in full uniform coffee cooling in my hand, watching a unit of trainees double time past the parade field. Their cadence echoed off the asphalt sharp, hungry loud. They reminded me of who I used to be, eager to prove eager to belong. My aide, Lieutenant Maya Kessler, knocked once and stepped in without waiting. She was like that, sharp edges with a good heart. She glanced at the envelope still sitting on the corner of my desk. You going? I didn't answer right away. Just looked down at the crisp lettering again. Major General Rowan Creed. So sterile, so deliberate. It's not an invitation, I said finally. It's a stage direction. Maya didn't argue. She rarely did. She just nodded slightly. Eyes scanning my face like she knew better than to push. You've got a 72-hour window, ma'am, she said quietly. If you want it. I nodded. Book it. She left the room without another word. I stared after her, then let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I wasn't going home, not really. That place stopped being mine the moment my father's casket rolled down the church aisle, and there was no seat left for me in the front row. I stood the entire funeral in full dress blues, 6 rows back, behind some second cousins I hadn't seen since middle school. No one turned around. No one spoke my name. But they saw the stars on my shoulders. I know they did. That's the thing about shame. When it's served with enough sugar, people mistake it for tradition. As I packed my overnight bag, I tucked my dress uniform into a separate garment carrier. Not out of pride, not even out of necessity, but because I knew what that uniform did to people like them. People who preferred me, small, silent, forgettable. I wasn't going back for reconciliation. I wasn't hoping for a miracle. I was going because I'd finally earned the right to stand in a room that once tried to erase me and not flinch. And this time, I wouldn't be the one holding her breath. Virginia looked exactly the way I remembered it, like a postcard someone forgot to personalize. Trimmed hedges, white fences, windless, colorless calm. It was the kind of perfection that felt rehearsed. I parked across the cul-de-sac from the house I'd grown up in. Still 2 stories, still tan siding. Still that ridiculous brass eagle perched above the garage, like a warning. I sat in the car longer than I should have, watching the curtains shift slightly in the living room. They already knew I was here. I didn't knock right away. I took in the porch swing with its faded cushions, the familiar creak of the front steps as I climbed them. My stomach clenched as I caught the faintest trace of lemon wax polish, the scent of disapproval scrubbed into wood. The door opened before I could raise my hand. My mother stood there, composed as ever, in a pale blouse buttoned to the neck. Virginia Creed didn't age. She calcified. Her eyes landed on the uniform draped over my arm, then flicked to my face like she was bracing for disruption. "Rowan," she said flatly. No smile. "Please don't ruin this for Sierra. Not hello, not I'm glad you came. Just that." I nodded once. It wasn't worth asking what she meant by ruin. My mere presence had always felt like an inconvenience she had to arrange around. Inside, nothing had changed. Same ivory carpet, same grandfather clock that hadn't ticked in years, same photos on the mantel. Sierra in a prom dress, Sierra at her college graduation, Sierra holding a golden retriever puppy I never met. No photos of me, not one. The rehearsal dinner was already underway. 14 people seated around a long mahogany table. 15 place settings. Guess which one was mine far end? Near the kitchen door. The only chair without an armrest. Just enough heat from the oven to make the seat uncomfortable. I stood for a moment scanning the table. No one stood to greet me. No one moved over to make room. A cousin glanced up and whispered something to the woman beside her. I caught the word decorum. I sat down quietly. No one looked up again. That's the thing about being erased, you don't vanish. You're just ignored until silence swallows your outline. As the main course was served, I noticed my water glass was half full when everyone else's had already been topped off twice. Small things. Subtle. Not mistakes. Messages. And I read them all. They didn't have to say it aloud. I was there but not included. Present but not welcome. And they thought they could still manage me like a detail in a seating chart. But they forgot something. I don't answer to this table anymore. The reception was held at a private estate in Albemarle County, all manicured hedges and glass chandeliers. Even the valet looked like he'd been auditioned. Everything gleamed like it had something to prove. I arrived precisely on time in full dress blues. Not to make a scene, just to ensure there would be no excuse for pretending I hadn't come. Inside, I approached the seating chart. Names etched in gold calligraphy mounted on an easel wrapped in white ribbon. I traced down the list past bride and groom. Table 1, parents of the bride. Table 2, and so on. There it was, C. Creed, table 13. No rank, no full name. Just a lonely initial tucked near the bottom, beside the words, catering exit. When I reached my table, the place setting was immaculate, except for one thing. The napkin folded at my plate was off-white. Everyone else's pure ivory. It wasn't a mistake. It was a signal. I sat. No one made room. No one looked up. Across the room, Sierra was radiant in a silk gown, camera-ready smile fixed like glass. She moved through the guests like a politician, graceful, curated, untouchable. When she passed my table, she paused just long enough to deliver her line. I told the planner not to make it too military-looking for your side. She didn't wait for a response. I didn't offer one. Dinner moved forward like a parade of pleasantries. Chilled soup, sea bass, sorbet palate cleanser. At one point, a waiter accidentally skipped me during the dessert round. He circled back only after my untouched coffee drew attention. Of course, he apologized. Of course, he whispered. But I knew the choreography. When the toasts began, my father stood first. He spoke of legacy, of guidance, of how Sierra had always been a light in their lives. My mother followed with a glass of Prosecco raised high. To grace, she said, and loyalty. Her eyes never drifted toward me. Then Sierra took the microphone. Champagne flute and hand dress shimmering under the overhead lights, she gave a smile that could sell lies in bulk. And to think, she said brightly, even my big sister made it flying all the way from wherever she's stationed, guarding doors these days. Laughter, not polite, not awkward. It was loud, full, painless for them. Then my mother added voice sharp and sweet as a blade. She may be the family's shame, but at least she's punctual. More laughter, glasses clinking. I didn't flinch. I didn't scowl. I simply stood, lifted my untouched glass, and said clear and calm, "The people I guard outrank everyone in this room." Silence fell like a curtain, not because they were ashamed, but because for the first time they weren't sure where to place me. I was still standing when I saw him. Across the room, just behind a cluster of fraternity friends and wine-flushed aunts, stood the groom, Captain Eli Prescott. He hadn't laughed, hadn't clinked his glass. He'd just been watching. Our eyes locked. His jaw tightened. One slow breath left him like a decision settling. Then he moved, past the cousins whispering into napkins, past the retired neighbors and family friends I didn't recognize, past my mother, who leaned forward, hissing something sharp that he didn't acknowledge, past Sierra, whose smile faltered mid-sip. He stopped one pace from me, not close enough to be casual, not far enough to escape the weight of what came next. He stood tall shoulders, squared boots, quiet against the polished floor. And then he saluted, sharp, full extension, regulation perfect. The air went still. Somewhere a fork clinked against a plate. No one moved. "This is Major General Rowan Creed," he said, voice steady and loud enough to cut through glass. "She's my commanding officer. Please forgive my wife." There was a gasp. Not loud, but collective, like a ripple of air sucked backward. Sierra dropped her glass. It struck the floor and rolled unbroken. But she wasn't. Her hands trembled. Her lips parted in shock, but no words followed. My mother stood so abruptly, her chair tipped backward. No one helped her upright. And then, from the far right corner of the ballroom, a man in uniform, older retired, rose to his feet. Colonel Reedon. I hadn't seen him in years. He raised his hand in silent salute. Then another followed. General Park. Then a woman in a navy dress, whose name I didn't know, but whose eyes told me she'd once worn stars too. 4 salutes. No speeches, no pity, just recognition. And for the first time, no one looked away. Eli lowered his hand. He didn't speak again, just stepped back. He gave me the floor not because I needed it, but because it was already mine. I didn't take the microphone. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stood there, surrounded by the weight of everything they had tried to deny. And somehow my silence said more than their entire ceremony. The hotel lounge was dim and expensive. One of those places designed for quiet conversations that never leave the room. My mother was already seated when I arrived. Pale cardigan, pearl earrings, black coffee. Not a hair out of place. "You certainly made a statement," she said without looking up. I didn't answer. She knew I wouldn't. She lifted the cup to her lips, sipped, then said, "The media's buzzing. Some of the headlines are dramatic. Some are flattering, I suppose." Still, I said nothing. I wasn't prepared for what happened, she continued. Sierra wasn't. Your father wouldn't have been either. I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. Sierra fainted. She has sensitivities. To truth, her cup hit the saucer harder than necessary. I didn't come to fight. Then why did you come? She hesitated. For the first time, her gaze faltered. I thought, maybe you could issue a statement, something neutral, clarifying that we misunderstood your role. I let the silence stretch between us like ice cracking under weight. Then I reached into my leather folio and pulled out a document. I placed it on the table between us. She didn't touch it, just stared. "This was filed 7 years ago," I said. An anonymous tip to the Department of Defense Ethics Board. Allegations of falsified combat reports. Claims I was unstable, politically promoted. It stalled my first star. Her expression didn't change. She'd been preparing for this moment for years. That could have come from anyone, she said evenly. "You're a public figure." I slid the second page forward. Linguistic analysis. Military grade. Pattern sentence structure phrasing. 96% match to Sierra Creed. Secondary match, you. Her fingers twitched just once, then steadied. "She sent it," I said. "But you gave her the language, the access, the tone." Still, she didn't deny it. "You didn't just ignore me," I continued. "You sabotaged me, quietly, elegantly, efficiently." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Finally, her voice dropped low. "I made choices," she whispered, "and I paid for them." "No," I said. "You didn't pay. You just stopped calling." She looked away. The corners of her mouth trembled, but no tears came. "I was trying to protect the family's name." "No," I corrected. "You were trying to protect Sierra's spotlight. She didn't have to win. I just had to disappear." Her hands curled around the empty coffee cup. "I never wanted to lose you." "You didn't lose me," I said. "You erased me. Then blamed me for being gone." She reached across the table, fingers hovering just short of mine. But she never landed. I left the States 2 weeks later, not in shame, not in anger. Just with a clarity so sharp, it felt like breath after drowning. The military offered me a chair position on the new Joint Ethics Advisory Board, a role made almost laughable by the irony it was the very system that once stalled my first star, based on a lie born in my own house. I declined. I didn't offer an explanation. Instead, I filed my retirement papers quietly and flew to Italy on a one-way ticket. The cottage I rented clung to the cliffs near Ravello, where the sea stretched out like a quiet promise, and the air smelled of lemon salt and thyme. No salutes, no briefings, no dinners full of clinking glasses and sharpened smiles. Just olive trees, canvas light, and a small espresso pot that hissed each morning like it was trying to whisper me back to life. The clip from the wedding went viral. Over 4 million views in 48 hours. The caption read, "They mocked her until her rank silenced the room." I didn't share it, didn't comment, didn't explain, because it wasn't mine anymore. Recognition is loud when it finally arrives, but it's also strangely irrelevant when you no longer need it. I poured my energy into something different. A Foundation Sentinel Reach. Quiet under the radar. Built for service members whose careers had been silently sabotaged, not by enemies in uniform, but by spouses, siblings, parents. The ones who knew where to aim so it wouldn't leave bruises. We didn't promise revenge. We offered clarity, because some battles don't wear uniforms. Some take place at kitchen tables at weddings, in empty inboxes on birthdays. The irony never left me. The people who worked hardest to erase me were the ones who ended up making me unforgettable. One afternoon, a boy from the village ran up the hill with a loaf of bread and a dog nipping at his heels. He paused on the terrace panting and asked in hesitant English, "Were you really a general?" I smiled once. He grinned, nodded like it made perfect sense, and bolted off barefoot, leaving crumbs in his wake. I stood there for a long while, watching the coastline fade into dusk, the wind lifting strands of hair I no longer pinned back. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It held me, not as a punishment, but as proof that I'd survived the kind of war no one writes medals for. Months passed. Letters came. Some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Others from strangers who'd watched the wedding clip and saw pieces of themselves in the silence I never broke. One letter came in my mother's handwriting. I recognized the loop of her R before I even opened it. She said she'd watched the PBS interview, the one where I talked about betrayal chain of command and what it means to be exiled without being excommunicated. She wrote, "I didn't realize how far you had climbed. I wish I had seen you then." But that was the thing. She did see me. She just didn't want to. And now she doesn't get access to who I've become. Not out of bitterness, not even out of grief, but because I finally love myself enough to choose distance without guilt. Some days I walk the cliff trail above the Amalfi Coast, the wind threading through the olive trees like an old friend. Other days, I sketch out plans for a new trauma recovery initiative for young veterans who carry wounds no MRI can scan. I don't wear my uniform anymore. I don't need to. It served its purpose. It got me through the battlefield. But exile. My family taught me that, and I made peace with it. This morning, a girl from the village brought me a tin of anchovies wrapped in a ribbon. She asked if I missed America. I told her the truth. I don't miss being invisible. She smiled like she understood. And maybe she did. Because some of us don't walk away to hurt anyone. We walk away because we finally understand the difference between being quiet